I see myself looking at the screens here, but I can never tell it's actually going until there's a preview here that's slightly behind. Alrighty, dear friends, dear family, and of course, dear seething freaks that stalk me from Twitter, welcome to Marchese Daily, where we do some sociocultural and political analyses that arm you with some frameworks to better facilitate your life and get your eyes on the prize and find your fulfillment. Today, as promised, I'm going to go as long as I can about this women texting thing that circulated. So, for those of you that didn't see, there was this viral post by this ostensible dating coach that is a woman, a member of the double X chromosome havers. And the text messages appear fairly innocuous. It's, what do you, like, how else do you start a conversation? Do you have to instantaneously be some boisterous douchebag with some kind of epically epic one liner? It's kind of like this level of neuroticism of not being able to just say hi and coon brain foitards instantaneously going, that's boring. That's kind of like a fundamental problem amongst many in the dating landscape, I suppose, or even just sociability landscape. So we'll go over that. I'll go over some musings. Why the hell did my space end? Stand by. Space crashed out. Literally, space crashed. I don't know what the hell happened. Apologies for the space crash. So, anyway, we'll go over that and I'll go over some musings as I am simultaneously working on the degree and the counseling stuff, and I'll give you some insight, some of the inside baseball of some of the assignments I have to do and my thoughts on them, in particular how there is cringe and gay, but really most of the cringe and gay is only insofar as you interpret it conveniently in this cringe and gay way. So that's our intro there. Before we begin, Marchese Maxers, like, subscribe, retweet, reply, read stuff, read all my stuff. I know it's long, but if you're a Marchese Maxer, if you're a true fan of this, you can bear the unbearable. That is to read more than 10 words at one time. Also, if you would like coaching and or based therapy, you can head on over to marchesemethods.com for a one-on-one, a singular one-on-one, or you could do 4 sessions in advance for a discount. And if that's a little bit intimidating, you can also DM or email me at marchesemethods at proton.me for a link to my Discord where you can text me all day, every day for just a $5 a month. So I'll start with the musings here because they're a little bit simpler and easier. So yesterday, and you guys might have noticed my behavior has been like I get a handful of tweets out in the evenings, and that's because I'm busy throughout the day. I prepare for the show, and which is an extension of just tweeting anyway. It's just speaking it anyway. And I will say it has been the little musing here is it has been a good exercise in getting some of my thoughts out because it's making me write better, actually. I have all this stuff in my mind, so much so that I could whip up something 1,000 words or so in one morning, or, in one day I whipped up about 3,000 words or so for something else. So dude, the space keeps crashing. All right, so if you wanted to listen through a space, just watch the live stream here. Something's going wrong with it. I also need to refresh. It says it's connected to Twitter. All right, so my Twitter live stream is going, whatever. I'll just open up a space there after the stream. So I've been doing that, and then I've also been doing the assignments, of course, and the thinking, and you guys might have seen me tweet yesterday or the day before, that is that, like, there is a problem in the school system. There is a problem with the social sciences that is not only just this obsession and compulsion with empiricism, and not only how gay and libtarded it is, but also how midwitted it is. Like, this is a graduate program, and this isn't me shaming them specifically or anything or whatever, just in case somebody finds me out here, finds out that I am that student. But most of my time has to be spent like forcing my answers to the assignments and everything into responses that aren't fucking mid-witted and cringe. For example, just even these sentence structures, I might have said this already, but these sentence structures of like, as a mental health counselor, it's important to take care of your health. It's like, these are so nothing things to say. Or this is how the therapy, this, that, according to this study, counselors can improve their client's health by using this technique. It's like, yeah, okay, like, no, duh. Do we even need to really say that? Like, how? Why? What's the inference? What's the underlying structure? So I have to spend a lot of time doing that. And one of the things amongst the texts and the reading, and this is all stuff I already knew, but I was thinking about it as I was browsing the material. And you guys have heard me talk about the superego, id, ego. And I thought about how it says that there is, a balance between all these things is a prerequisite for a healthy personality, a healthy mentality, a healthy mental health. And I thought, I'm like 99% of people are going to take that, and classical cope theory transmute that into, okay, it's important to have a balance in your superego, id, and ego, according to the studies of, and then it's like, then the therefore is going to be, it's a balance, so therefore, basically neglect your superego, basically neglect any moral mandate, any guilt, any semblance of, I have to do more than be a fucking coomer. You can imagine how many people are like, or how many of these people will become therapists, and this is rightfully where everyone says, yeah, fucking therapy is bullshit. They'll become therapists, and when somebody says, yeah, I don't know, I feel guilty because I don't work out or something, they're going to turn it into, well, actually, you should not feel guilty because it's important to be balanced, and that's not good for you to be guilty because of your superego is mean and it's not good for you. And it's like, no, faggot retard. The balance there doesn't actually mean some gay 50-50 thing or some bulwark against the intensity of the superego. The balance means living up to your superego such that you're not going to feel guilty. I wouldn't even say 80-20 just because 80-20 is so trite and gay to say now, and that doesn't even really come from anything. That comes from fucking economics. I would say, like, aim for 90-10. 90% of the time, do the right thing. Do what you feel is right. Do what's best for you in the face of not feeling like it, in the face of pleasure or displeasure. And you might have heard me say this before, but I'll reiterate. The answer to that, the scary thing about that is, oh no, I'm going to have to self-flagellate all day, every day. But that's not the answer. The answer is you're just going to try hard enough and preoccupy yourself hard enough with doing the right thing such that you forget to do the wrong thing. And then when you do the wrong thing, you don't self-flagellate to get yourself to stop, because inevitably you're going to do wrong things. You are a human. You are a human being. If you did the right thing every second of every day, you would be a robot or like God incarnate. The only person to have ever lived a perfect life, well, actually two, or don't shit on me if I don't quite have this right, but last I heard in RCIA and everything, the only two people who lived a perfect life and were free from sin are Jesus and Mary. And so you're not them, you're not nowhere near remotely close to them, so you can accept your fallen nature, you can accept the nature of you're going to do wrong things. That's not an excuse. You are just going to inevitably and endlessly, perpetually try to emulate Jesus and Mary anyway. Even though you know you're not going to 100% be like them, you are going to incrementally and perpetually try to be like them. And even if you're not religious specifically per se, whatever your moral ideal, whatever your moral aspiration, who you want to live up to be is, you are going to perpetually do that, yet simultaneously accept that you have a body and with all of its tendencies that are inevitably not just even pleasure, but just things that aren't pursuant to the soul, we'll say. So you accept it, you don't self-flagellate. You might even let yourself have a little bit of guilt there, a little bit of guilt. But you reconcile that you have put forth a significant effort and you resolve to put forth effort every single day to do right, to be right. So those are some of my musings about this program of counseling that I've been in study for and everything. So anyway, so now this text story, this is by a Blaine Anderson. The tweet states, texting is a blind spot for most single men. To make successful introductions as a matchmaker, an underrated aspect of my job is preventing my clients from texting themselves out of dates. To illustrate, here's a text conversation between one of my single girlfriends and a guy another matchmaker introduced her to. This guy is almost 40, successful, handsome, etc., but texts like he's in high school. My girlfriend got the ick. IMO, in my opinion, that stands for, this is his matchmaker's fault. Face. So first of all, this story isn't about her so much. The story is about the woman in the text messages. But let's just think for a moment here about the kind of person that is a dating coach for women, a woman dating coach for women. So first of all, but texts like he's in high school. What exactly does it mean to text like you're in high school? Because a phrase like my girlfriend getting the ick, who says that? Fucking sorority girls in college. So who's the juvenile one here? What is even so juvenile about this text? I'll read it to you shortly. And then even using an emoji like this, unironically, the emoji. What is wrong with you? Like, how, like, you people just all live completely in your own little insufferable gay fucking worlds. You want to talk about being juvenile. You want to talk about talking like you're in high school. Getting the ick. That's precisely what it means. What does that even fucking mean, faggot? Getting the ick. What does that even mean? I'll say what that means shortly. So let's just go over the text here. The guy says, "Hello, Steph. How are you? This is blank. I received your number from blank. I was very happy about it too." And don't let my tonality of saying this influence your perception of this. You could go down my Twitter page to see, I think I quoted, or go down my Twitter page. I posted an article about this last night, and I'm going to reiterate the article, but you'll see the tweets there. You'll see the text there. And so don't let my tonality influence your understanding of how these text messages go. I was very happy about it too. I received your number from blank. I was very happy about it too. Wasn't sure what messaging platform you prefer, ... Hey, blank, nice to meet you. How long have you lived in Miami? LOL, first text back at 1 a.m. It was 12 a.m., but whatever. I like your style. I'm actually 6th generation Miami Floridian. Like, I left for 12 years or so, but I'm born and raised. How about you? Also, what you been up to tonight? Morning, this is at 7 a.m., so this part was at 12 a.m., and then the morning was at 7 a.m. Morning. I don't think this is going to be a fit, but I wish you all the best. Have a great day. And so, now, I've been saying on every show, stop talking about women, and then my shows inevitably talk about women. But that's because that's all anybody fucking talks about. But it does provide some insight into some of these psychodynamics and the analogies and interpersonal behavior and all the preoccupations. So this isn't so much about women per se. This is just about really fundamentally the human nature of being a big fat baby and how this is demonstrated in both sexes in this instance anyway. And not to be a faggot, to be all like, both men and women are being... Like, this is for the most part a woman issue, but men are certainly enabling it. So let's just, like, go over this text. What exactly is such a fucking problem about the way this guy is texting? By definition, like, how, when you meet somebody, like, what's the first, what would have happened if he gave like a first text was like some boisterous joke, some sort of player-esque thing? She would have been like, ew, this is like so immature. And whoa, whoa, you need to like, whoa, like that. Like, I've literally heard women say that. So it's always this meme with women of this like goldfish emotionality. They'll say one thing and really feel it in this moment right here, right now. And then when the thing that they ask for happens, they suddenly that feeling they completely forget that feeling. And then the new feeling enters. And then all of a sudden their entire schema of the entire world and how this is all supposed to go completely changes. Now, this is like a woman thing, but the precipitating element to that is a nature both men and women have. That is to be indulgent, to be impulsive, to be a big fat baby because it feels good. And it feels good because our brain provokes instincts or provokes those feelings when they are pursuant to our survival, and provokes discomfort feelings when they're not impursuant to our survival. But women fundamentally have this problem a little bit more of a weighted and a little bit more common degree because it is a more heavily weighted heuristic for their survival because of the physical differential. So that's like women's goldfish problem with their feelings. That is like a fundamental problem of growing the fuck up and developing some sentience and some agency. Now, part of the question becomes, well, how can they do that in the face of this feelings and all of that? They need a value proposition. They need a value proposition both given to them by us, but also they need to feel the value proposition. And this can just be made evident to them in how many of them are fucking miserable following their id essentially their entire lives. How many times have we seen this stuff and like they do the goldfish meme throughout their 20s, they feel a certain way, and then suddenly in their 30s a new feeling enters and then they regret their 20s. They'll tell 20-year-old women to not do what they did, but the 20-year-old women, fucking peanut brains, can't figure it out because they feel what they feel right here, right now, and they will refuse to operate on any teleology other than their feelings right here, right now. So there has to be a value proposition of anticipating feelings, and the feeling that they need to understand that we need to give them and they need to exercise amongst each other is separating feeling good and being good, pleasure and happiness, displeasure and unhappiness. We have a problem conflating the two, and it's not necessarily going to chastise everybody for being stupid or something like that, but we have a problem of conflating the two. Some thought exercises you could just do in why these things are fundamentally different is in, well, suppose you are pleased to the maximum degree. You're famous, you got money, you don't have to do anything all day, you can do your drugs and your precious fucking alcohol all day. You get to have sex all day with as many people as you want all day, let's say. Would you be happy? Are those people that have that happy? Don't like celebrities like that end their lives, end their own lives? I think of the guy Avicii. He ended his own life. He was one of the biggest EDM stars. That's just in my mind because that's the only like celebrity consciousness I guess I have. But tons of these people are miserable. They're freaks. So that's obviously a good enough heuristic there to at least investigate what it truly means to be happy, fulfilled. How many people have done the endless promiscuity, the endless sex with everybody anywhere, and are miserable, to include men? Because men use that as a means to protect themselves from castration anxiety, sort of like Lord Voldemort. If you remember the Harry Potter show, he split his soul across 7 ways. Men will split their sexuality across a myriad of women so as to not concentrate too much power or masculine leverage in one woman. If one woman denies sex, well, there are 6 others to choose from. It's sort of like a probability thing. It's sort of like a convergence upon someone somewhere is going to give it to them. But what's the problem of that? The problem is needing that as a expression of masculinity in the first place, or needing this feminine sexual approval. So obviously they're miserable with that. Despite it even feeling good, despite it even stroking your ego. But what do you get out of that? All you get to say is, oh yeah, well I fuck more girls than you, or something along those lines, when you're like battling retards online. So this is far from joyful. All of this stuff is to say that it's an example of sorry, one sec. It is an example of separating pleasure and happiness. Happiness is peace. Happiness is resolving all this pathology in your head. Happiness is that and having something to do, and your wife or your husband existence, that your relationship to them. You could think of too what you want out of a relationship. What you think you want right now is this egotistical stuff of some kind of approval, this transactional stuff. And what's the problem with that? You're preoccupied with getting something out of it, and when you don't get something out of it, it poses an existential threat to your entire identity and existence. Now, this doesn't mean keel over, but the example I always use is think of your friends. Think of some of the people that you're friends with. You're not thinking twice about what you do for them and what they do for you. You're not thinking twice about who does what, under what circumstance. Sometimes you have to deal with the transactional nature of friendship, but overall, most of your time spent with your friends, or most of the time or energy in your mind spent on your friends, is just memeing, having a good time. You just enjoy their existence, their thoughts, their interpretations, their jokes, who they are, their fundamental identity. And the exchange is your identity for their identity. The exchange is your presence for their presence. So a relationship to the opposite sex is actually supposed to have that very similar component, except it's sexual in nature too, and it's a little bit more intimate. That's all it is. That's all it's supposed to be. And you don't get this until you actualize. And all of this stuff about the dating landscape and all that fundamentally is an expression of everyone not actualizing. So the nature of the text. Now let's just go over the social stuff. What else are you supposed to do? Be instantaneously boisterous? What's more, he actually does try to at least engage in some way, haha, the first text at 1 a.m. That's totally socially appropriate, and that's totally an appropriate cue to sort of try to engage. Necessarily, your first meeting of somebody is trying to feel each other out and understand each other, and so when you try to engage in some fashion, of course it's not going to be the perfect thing said at the perfect time, because you fundamentally do not know this person yet. So you tease, you entertain, you try to engage in that somewhat, and overall that's supposed to, at the very least, give you a cue. And if a properly socialized fucking woman is who you're texting, they're going to at least engage with it a little bit. At least feel it out. Now, some women will object to that because they'll say, well, I don't want to escalate in that fashion because I'm not quite sure yet. It's like, well, you don't really, the only way to be sure is to escalate at least a little bit. Get a feel for each other, get past the initial stages of trying to understand the other person's identity, interaction, and all of that. We all know and understand that we sort of are a different version of ourselves depending on who we interact with, and that's not subordinate to them per se, but necessarily to interact appropriately and effectively with a person, you're not necessarily compromising by coming to some middle ground, but you are interacting with them in a way where you two can come together. You two have the sharing. There's a Venn diagram of you and the other person. You're necessarily going to operate in the middle of that Venn diagram. And maybe there's moments where you disengage from that and portray or show another part of your identity, or maybe you're healthily identifying where you're not on the same page. This comes in the form of disagreements, or talking about even politics or something like that. So this is totally socially appropriate, and Is it quote unquote lame in some fashion? You know, I guess so, but every first meeting of everybody is fucking lame. Wouldn't it be exhausting anyway for every single wakeful interaction with every single person, every single second of the day to be highly stimulating and some kind of dopamine fucking fry? I actually don't like that. That takes away from me, like, it takes away from you being you. It takes away from you living as yourself. You're preoccupied with outside of yourself now if you're endlessly interacting in this fashion. So now let's go back to the woman goldfish element to this, the woman goldfish feelings to this. This is impulse. This is this combination of impulse and this availability thing. I really hate how much people go over this stupid, insufferable fucking platitude point. Excuse me. Excuse me. I hope you don't hear that on the mic. Kind of gross and rude and all of that to do that live, but whatever. I'll have to figure out how to time my morning energy drink consumption to avoid that. Anyway, the impulsivity of this is, I'm not instantaneously getting a dopamine rush. Now, women use this heuristic because they're being peanut little immature brains, but also they use that heuristic in dating because that's their only understanding of masculinity. That's their only understanding of how dating's supposed to go. They falsely conflate that a relationship is supposed to be a feeling spike 24/7. And part of that is the messaging of movies and Hallmark movies and music and everything. They think it's supposed to be some sort of drug-like euphoria at every wakeful second of every wakeful day. A drug-like euphoria at every juncture. But drug-like euphoria betrays consistency. It betrays not safety per se, it does, but it betrays the nature of how you're supposed to relate to somebody. Relating to somebody can't and shouldn't and isn't like that. We mentioned the example before. You could also just think of getting your needs met through a relationship would definitionally put you at peace. You could think of when you're hungry or something, right? You need to eat, you need to do this, that, the other thing. And then when you facilitate that, you come into a mood or a sense of peace. So that's what a relationship's actually supposed to be. It's not supposed to be this tumultuous, up and down, endless dopamine rush, but women falsely use that as a heuristic because they think through media, like peanut retards, that the definition of a relationship, the way to know as well that he is a manly man is those feelings. Because their barometer is not the same as us. For us, it's visual. For them, it's visual too. That's one of many cues. But they also are, looking for those interpersonal psychosocial cues. And they did evolve that circuitry to detect that through the feeling spike. So they also sort of falsely linearize it to say, well, more feelings must imply more masculinity. But we all can observe there's also a problem to this, wherein our feelings betray us in that sense. They conflate feelings from pathology with feelings from the nature of relating to a man or a woman, the excitement. They'll also get excitement, stimulus, through replicating their relationship to their father. This is like what daddy issues actually is. But if their relationship to their father, or rather replicating or satiating the pathological response to their relationship to their father, also provokes excitement, also provokes feelings in the extremum. And so what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that if the nature of that produces an unhealthy way to relate to the opposite sex, because now you are protecting yourself. Now you are satiating a vulnerability. Now you are trying to heal a wound wrongfully. Healing that wound externally, using an external means, an external observation, tangibility, relationship to heal that. And so this is the nature of what sort of creates these extremes. The extreme good is when you feel safe according to your pathological construct, and then the extreme bad feelings is when you feel unsafe according to that pathological construct. You feel unsafe when the behavior and the nature of the relationship replicates or provokes or excavates the wound. And then that wound is out in the open. And so with that wound out in the open, you're terrified, and then you overcorrect and over respond by trying to take the nature of the relationship to the pathological opposite end of the extremum of safety, emotionally. And when you have two complementary pathologies, when you have a pathology where this one feels safe when this one feels in danger and vice versa, you have the disaster that is people relating and getting into all sorts of trouble and issues in their relationship for years and years on end. So, and throughout our show, we'll dive into some specific examples of how this works and psychoanalyze them. So, all that's to say, women have this nature problem of feeling heuristic, but also feeling heuristic in masculinity, but also feeling heuristic betrayed by their pathology. So now there's also like the broader social construct, the social stuff that we talk about, these points about the availability of men to women that provokes this sensation of they don't have to try, or, you know, elevating their standards in some fashion. And thus they can linearize further their feelings heuristic. They, for the most part, don't feel obligated for a single second of a single day to bear the unbearable torture of not being fucking stimulated for 3 seconds of an interaction. Because there's the whole myriad and plethora of men available to them. But why is there a myriad or plethora of men available to them? It isn't just because of fucking betas. It is because this alpha red pill consortium has this problem of doing this epically epic masculinity point of, well, that's just how women are. You just got to accept women's nature. And this is a false heuristic as well, because while they rightfully acknowledge that the majority of women are going to behave like this because of that natural heuristic they have, they're also enabled to by men. Particularly these alpha-esque types, because although they LARP that they have a higher standard and they demand more of women, they don't actually, because they're doing the low IQ thing of only being able to understand things in the tangible or in the observable. And in the intangible and in the observable is stuff like cooking, cleaning, taking care of the children. I'm a freaking alpha and you're going to freaking take care of my children and submit. But what does that mean? That's all fucking easy for them. Cooking's fucking easy. I hate doing it. It's like, so you could say, in case anybody knows that I hate cooking, I don't like doing it. My wife is the one who does it. She likes it. It's easy to her. I just resent it. It feels like such a waste of time. And I resent having to be creative with it. My last name's Italian. I sort of have an Italian spirit, but there's a German component in there wherein in my crafts, in my activities, they have to be very industrious and very like linear or mathematical, I guess you could say. Very not artistic. So the cooking demand, the fucking taking care of the children, that's actually easy. They'll say otherwise, but that's just because they're being fucking babies. That's really easy. So for the most part, all that's being asked of them by these alpha red pill-esque types is just sex. And I'm not counter-signaling the overall idea of red pill and alpha per se. I'm a part of that world. You've seen my tweets. I'm a part of that. I have no problem elucidating the underlying dynamics and the bullshit that women say or something along those lines and what it means to be a man and alpha and everything, but a lot of these types take this stuff and still preoccupy themselves with women and preoccupy themselves with sex. you think of this idea of male value in the confines of the relational dynamics, and it's, oh, get more women liking you implies more value. And while that is a heuristic for them, they also use that as a heuristic to say, okay, well, other women like him, so I can check the box off of the, like, not going to kill me. I can check the box off of, if women are going for him, he must be amongst the top tier. He must be one of the levels at which I would aspire to get, per se, because he is attractive. And so, but ultimately, they still, like, really only ask women for sex, for sexuality. And this value stuff is them satiating their sense of value for themselves. And it's rightful to understand pre-selection and understand that you do have to be desired amongst many women. And there is this, like, economic component of, if they are fretful that other women are more than willing to offer you what she offers you, they will, up their game. They will up their ante. But overall, if alpha red pill types are demanding of them just sex for the most part, and what's fucking easy, like cooking and cleaning or whatever, they still don't really feel compelled or feel any sort of incentive to grow up, to mature, to develop sentience, agency. If anything, they more than happy to agree to this, because they get to fuck off the rest of their lives. We all recognize, amongst the men, we all recognize the value of sentience, agency, discipline, because it creates congruence. We have that incentive precipitating our value of actual free agency, free will. We have that precipitating understanding, that proposition of women demanding that of us psychically, psychosocially, to have that congruence, to have our behavior and our actions match, which necessarily implies discipline, because if you are manly, if you have masculinity, you have power. What does it mean to have power? You have power both externally and internally. So for great examples of this is if, like, your commander, faggot or whatever, lieutenant colonel homo, but you are subordinate to other people interpersonally. You have this authority on paper, but interpersonally you listen to other people, you subordinate to other people, you subordinate to, in the congruence, to your feelings and impulses. That, in a way, it reads to them as, by definition, effeminate. It also provokes the sensation that they can control you. It gives them a disgust. I won't say it gives them the ick, because that's fucking juvenile. I'll say it disgusts them, because they can now sense how well and easily they can control you. And if they can control you and leverage you, you are incapable of providing and protecting, because you're not able to sequester your feelings to do these things. And so women demand of us that congruence. And so men rightfully pick up on this. The earliest sort of battles men have with this is the gym stuff. The gym has nothing to do with the weights, the physique, and all of that. It has everything to do with discipline and congruence. A man who trains and exercises his abilities to sequester his feelings and all that will exude that confidence of living up to their superego ideal, but also the confidence of impenetrable through their ability to sequester such feelings. And so when women shit test them, and when women place all sorts of games to try to manipulate him, to try to leverage feelings upon him and sexuality upon him, he's unfazed by that, because he knows what it amounts to in the end. And he also understands and values and develops his love for agency, his love for free will, his love for transcendence. Power over oneself and one's feelings implies you have power. That is the essence of power. And so having that power makes you read as capable, as also interpersonally capable, because you're able to leverage your abilities or whatever to ascertain higher status, to climb the ranks. When you climb the ranks, we do have this hunter-gatherer thing of distributing resources according to who's the highest ranking. And so when you have the greatest access to the resources because you're amongst the leader of the tribe or something like that, the leader or amongst the leaders, that necessarily means that in your relationship to her, she will have greater access to greater resources, further linearly bolstering her survivability and the reproductive ability of her and her children and the family. So we have that sexual value proposition of that preceding our value of that in and of itself. We need to have that for women. And how does that apply? Does that really sort of sexually turn us on in some fashion? No, but it is what we need or require to be willing to give them access to us. Because if it's just sexuality, it's any of them. It doesn't really matter who they are or what they are. So for a relational component, which is what you want anyway, we think that all men need in some fashion is just sex. Sex is one of the ways that we sort of feel safe and we feel that we are related to by the woman, which she exacerbates. There is an element to you don't need her approving of you for you to feel confident and masculine and the like, but what the relationship needs is for her to make you feel that way. And that's mostly done through sex. But if you're trying to gain access to sex everywhere and anywhere, you're not really satiating that. You're satiating coon brain, you're satiating ego. You just need sex from the one woman. Because what you need is the relationship. You don't need a multitude of women to relate to. You need the one relationship with depth. And so now for her to gain access to you, you have to want more, or you have to understand the nature of a relationship goes well beyond her just sort of making you feel safe, making you feel masculine. It would also include her having agency, her being an actual tangible soulful identity for you to be able to relate to her in the way that she wants, which is for you to have a pair bond with her, you to give her your identity. Because that's how they feel safe, when they feel safe when you give that to them. Because that is a greater leverage than just sexuality. She can't leverage sexuality upon you. She can leverage your investment. And this isn't to say that, because that sounds like risky, that sounds dangerous, but that is to say that the way that we feel safe in the confines of a relationship in some fashion is an exchange of power. In a way, you already have that power. This is why sex feels so dangerous to them in a way, is because they're already physically vulnerable and their sexuality is complete physical vulnerability. At any given moment, no woman stands a chance against you. So that's sort of the latent, inherent power differential that they feel. So the balance, the counterbalance to that is for them to feel your feeling investment, for them to have access to the one vulnerability you actually have, which is your feelings. And so they need that. And so for you to give that to them, you have to demand of them more than just the sexuality. You have to demand of them agency, maturity, free will. And some men are doing this, rightfully so, in the modern day, but they sort of have this seethe to it that really amounts to just protectionism. They understand the emotional danger of that, so their ask is, or they just like walk away, which really for the most part you have to do, because if they don't have agency, or at least some semblance or some inklings of agency, they're never going to fucking really get it. Or if they are, you along the way will sort of give them none of that incentive for it. So now, what is the appeal of demanding that of them? How about just living with fucking peace? How about living and having a relationship with a wife, girlfriend, whatever, at peace? and like pleasant. It's actually pleasant when your wife has agency, has some interesting thoughts and something like that. And no, it's not sexually attractive per se. No, we don't care that they have degrees or something or that type of thing, but that is them having an identity is the differential between them and other women. If it's all just sex, every woman can give you sex fairly easily. And some of these guys try to falsely linearize it to say, well, hotter sex, hotter woman, hotter sex is the demand, is the increased demand. But again, have we ever seen hot girls really have to fucking do much for their hotness? Not really. You can also think about, too, they don't like that set up either in some fashion because they vaguely sense in their spirit, in their soul, that if they're not doing anything or if they don't have an identity, but you're purporting to relate to them and love them, they sense that you don't actually. Because if they don't have their identity observable to you or tangible to you and you're relating to them, they know that the nature of the relationship isn't real because you're not relating to their identity. You're just relating to their pussy. And so that's not to like shame men in this traditional fashion of all you want is sex, but that is to elucidate that it's not, they don't like it for that reason as well. So the proposition of demanding this of them, this is actually what it means to have higher standards. This is actually what it means to have that alpha male standards or whatever. If you have that access to sex to across a multitude of women, then by definition, that doesn't change dependent upon the women. It really doesn't change. That's what I was going to say. It doesn't change all that much dependent upon how hot the woman is, because it doesn't really linearize all that easily. There's obviously, you could have a picture between one woman versus another and subsequently conclude which one is quote unquote hotter per se. But what do you get out of that? You just get off harder, I guess. And what does that do for you or your life? And then, okay, well, what's the difference between hot girl A and hot girl B? Eventually you cross a threshold where even if you linearly measure it, you measure like the circumference of their... Did this just like shut down? Bruh, the camera just... Oh, did it come back? Okay. I heard the sound of the... I'm using my phone here and it connects to the Mac and it's like a continuity camera or something along those lines. So I heard the sound of the camera like turning on, so that must have implied it went off for a moment. So I guess I lost connection. But I see on the preview here it's back. So anyway, what was I saying? And I'll wrap this up shortly. We're approaching on an hour. If you're watching right now, be prepared. I'm going to try restarting the space on the desktop here to keep the stream going, although it might be a little strugglesome because it wasn't working. And then yesterday you might have seen the stream where I started the space after the stream, and if I have the audio going to the stream, it locks the audio. But maybe I'll just try taking the audio out of the stream components. So then if you're watching on stream, just do your best to try to, I guess, have the space open as well to get the audio. So anyway, wrapping this up, I'll say that is what it means to have higher standards. The higher standards trying to linearize hotness. Eventually you come across, okay, well, if you're such a Chad alpha, then necessarily every hot girl with a fat ass wants to fuck you. So what's the difference between this girl's fat ass and that girl's fat ass? All that does is just like some kind of ego stroke or something along those lines. And even then, what's the difference? There isn't really a understandable, observable, tangible difference there. So ultimately what you demand is identity. What you demand is free will and agency. And that's actual high standards because, right, by definition, we're also eagerly saying all women are insentient retards or something like that. So, okay, necessarily then you have such high standards for what you want in the end, which is the relationship, the family and everything. By definition, you would look to the outside of the average anyway. You would look to the right end of the tail end, the right end of the bell curve. You would necessarily that would be your search for women anyway. And since you're such a Chad alpha, you have access to all of them anyway, right? So why do we need to preoccupy with the behavior of the majority of women in that sense, even if they are insentient retards? Of course, they try to do that to wax this masculinity point of, well, I'm just, I'm emotionally resilient enough to accept that women are insentient retards and they don't care about me, but I'm emotionally resilient. And I don't give a fuck because I'm here to fuck. I'm here to fucking fuck these bitches, and I don't care because I'm, that I'm here to get it done. I'm a man and I get it freaking done. It's like, okay, well, why is that getting it done? What does it mean to get it done? Is that the want and or need? How does that not get tiresome? Aren't we so tired of pussy? Aren't we such tough guys that we're not particularly amused by pussy? So overall, the value proposition of a woman with agency and demanding that of women is the actual fulfillment, the actual relational component, the actual pleasant time with them, the non-irritability of their existence. And it does enrich your relationship. It does enrich the sexuality, actually, because it's a tangible person instead of just a white sticky pea, a place to white sticky pea. So anyway, I think that's a good enough amount of time for me to monologue here. So I'm going to try restarting the space here. If you are coming in, or if you would like to, you got some thoughts, feelings, concerns, you can do that. If you would like to leave a thought, feeling, or concern non-verbally through text or something, try, on X it doesn't show, but try looking for my profile on Entropy Stream, send a super chat, and I will monitor that situation from here. So let's see. Let's start the space here. Nope, not post. My friends, I saw Pixel Proghorn. If you're here, I know you joined the space right away earlier. Come on in. Okay, create the space. Musings. Record the space. Start now. Allow access to the microphone. Alrighty, you guys should see the space come up here. Let's hope and pray that it works. Alrighty, if you are watching or looking at all this stuff post-production, post-live stream, you might have seen there were some issues with the space, and I had to leave the space not running for the entire time because it kept crashing, so I'm only starting the space for the panel here. I don't see anybody in here yet, so let's check in the meantime if I have any comments on the live stream here. And no, these are just my usual notifications. What's going on with you guys, huh? Are you guys up and awake? Are you guys awake? Don't you guys all have freaking jobs or something? Don't you guys all have jobs to get up for, or have some high IQ thoughts? I know you're all high IQ. I know you guys got some thoughts. Maybe you guys just don't want to send me off. Give me any ideas to speak to, because then I'll send off and I'll sit here and I'll stream forever. We have my good friend at USA Sovereignty in here. I don't know if you were listening to the stream. I'll invite you as a speaker to share your thoughts on this text stuff. Let's get our systems a go here. Low IQ Italian moment who cannot get it together. All right, let's do invite speakers. There we go. All right, in the meantime, what else? What else is a funny LOL meme? I saw circulating Pearl Davis said porn has saved more marriages than anything or whatever else, or more marriages than it has destroyed or something. And the porn histrionics really does need a renewal of the conversation, because everyone learned 10 years ago the determinism of neurotransmitters and neuroplasticity and everything along those lines, and rightfully so, and we rightfully understand the drug-like effects of porn or something like that. But I don't know. Like, when I consumed porn, I wasn't looking up weird piss and shit, whatever the fuck. I didn't increase the novelty of the consumption. For the most part, you guys might have seen me tweet about this, and I think I actually talked about this on the show, so excuse me if this is trite, but most of what I looked for was just like hot girls. And when I did that, it wasn't a particular novelty stimulus, and I didn't like gain some kind of drug-like effect of whacking it several times a day. And I know this is gross. I know this is kind of intimate to give these details, but I guess this is the nature of the conversation. And so, like that, it never amounted to that. And actually, toward the later years of my consumption of that, I like regressed to like thirst traps. Like thirst traps was like the material that I would consume. And so, this idea that we're doing this like low IQ feelsy meme of the more intense the feelings, the more we're preoccupied with it. So the more intense the porn thing, we're more preoccupied with the danger of going to that or something along those lines. But most of my friends, I could sort of tell they were functional. They weren't that far along a porn addiction or something along those lines. And I think also this obsession and compulsion, like, it is wrong, and it doesn't just betray God. It betrays agency. It betrays free will. Men are particularly neurotic about it because they understand that it trains you to be subordinate to sexuality. I might have told the story once about I had this nasty breakup, and the nature of when you're in the latter stages of a relationship, you're trying to leverage power over each other, and women naturally resort to sex as a power leverage. And so they will resort to that. So that was what happened in that relationship, and that was the start of me trying to break porn, because I said to myself, well, if I'm going to ever relate to a woman such that I maintain frame and I maintain discipline and my masculinity, my balls, I am necessarily not going to be beholden to that one leverage that they always mobilize, which is sex. So I started breaking the porn thing. Actually went back to it after a few months or a year or so for a few years, and then eventually it sort of withered. And it more so withered because I wasn't so preoccupied with self-flagellating or my neurotransmitters with it. It just withered because I was more preoccupied with other things to fucking do. And, you know, naturally, actual sexuality does help. Yeah, being sexually active does help. But even then, that doesn't mean go sleeping around. That just means find the one and get married and everything that goes with that. For the whole slew of reasons, I'll talk forever if I go into why that is, both the Christian argument and I guess the secular argument, which really just is acknowledging the truth, the absolute truth of God. But anyway, so now all these fucking dorks were fucking lighting up Pearl for this type of stuff. And I'm not defending Pearl per se. I'm not defending these characters like as if I'm like, because then I'll get simp accusations for defending a woman on literally anything in any fashion, having anything positive to say about a woman in some fashion. And so I'm not defending her per se. The sentiment she proposes, that this porn saves marriages proposes, is that in the absence of a active sex life, for whatever reason, that ultimately needs an actual resolution in and of itself, whether you go to base therapy or if you go to some length to understand this dynamic, or you become more attractive for your spouse, something along those lines. Ultimately, the solution is that. But when in the meantime, when men consume porn, sometimes it does stop them from seeking sexuality elsewhere. So I understand that point. I think it's fundamentally wrong in sentiment. It's correct in like the logistics, but it's wrong in sentiment. It's wrong in really sort of encouraging that, or in a way enabling or authorizing that. But it most certainly isn't correct in the logistical component to it. And it's worth acknowledgement. It is worth tailoring our conversation about that, because there, rightfully, there isn't like the neurotransmitters of porn or whatever. It doesn't fucking send you into like heroin tier homelessness addiction. Like I think this preoccupation with porn as like the preeminent issue of the world or of the country or of our social issues is really more so a preoccupation with castration anxiety. We resent men resent the power sexuality has over them, to include their own sexuality, to include the sexuality of porn. They resent any version of indulgence because it is answering to something other than oneself, answering to something other than your soul, your identity. But this neurotransmitter stuff is also like this presupposition that in the absence of these negative neurotransmitters creating porn, that you sort of have typed up the Python code and hit the run button in your brain such that you're not making a conscious choice every day. And while I've advocated that when you're disciplined, discipline does indeed include that you don't even think about doing the wrong thing. It's also not necessarily a easy thing to do every day to resist temptation. It's not exactly a program in your mind. It'll never be a program in your mind. You have to do that. You have to do that even when you don't feel like it, and you have to do it when it's tempting. This idea or this supposition or this stratagem of trying to deterministically program your mind such that you don't do this stuff, you don't indulge because you never feel like indulging, is an indulgence in and of itself, is this attempt to optimize by saying or by getting it such that you will not behave wrong because you never feel like it, therefore excusing yourself from the tremor, the fervor, the ardentness, LOL, IQ moment, the labor intense activity of doing it or sequestering indulgence even when you don't feel like it, of resisting indulgence when you feel like indulgence. Ultimately, the fundamental nature of human existence is this version of suffering. This is what it means to suffer. This is what it means to be put on this earth to suffer. You will suffer with your innate nature to indulge and feel like indulging, but suffer with it will harm your spirituality. It'll harm your sense of self to indulge, so you don't indulge, but the alternative suffering is the discomfort and the displeasure of that. So ultimately that amounts to, as this side part of the porn stuff that I was seeing here just to keep us going, is that the proverb here, the Marchese mantra here is you can be happy, joyful, at peace, and uncomfortable and displeased, or you can be miserable, resentful, hateful, and pleased or comfortable. So I think that's everything here. Sovereignty, I invited you to speak, but if you're just listening, by all means, I appreciate you attending here. If you would like to speak, I'll stand by for a moment, or I'll watch for your signals here through the reactions on the space for you to give any thoughts. Last call for thoughts. Last call for anybody watching the stream to enter the space. The space is working now. And while we wait, I'll give my outro here. Oh, there we go. There you are.
Yeah, I'll say something real quick, even though I don't think, you know, most women should even talk about this publicly, like how it goes, circulates.
Yeah.
Um, I just think it's uncouth, and I think it's used as a way to browbeat men, not
Yes.
because they are truly super offended, which I agree with everything you said. Um, Obviously, you should strive to um, forge that character, those virtues,
Yes.
um, and that doesn't include obvious consumption of, whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to engage in it doing porn, I do think that they are happy. And obviously, I mean, like long-term boyfriends, when you've settled in, if you do things the retarded way.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it brings them joy because it allows them to just kind of wash their hands of any kind of attempt at greatness for themselves.
Yes.
Um, they can settle in, they can allow themselves to remain fat or get fat,
Yes.
and it provides them this excuse of, okay, well, I can just continue to bring this up, I can continue to browbeat you with this, and, you know, um, I think it's just a weapon in their chest, a war chest,
Yes.
in the relationship. And so, yeah, I'm not going to discuss it too much because, again, like, I'm of the opinion that it's not very appropriate
Yeah.
for women to mass engage in this kind of dialogue, especially online.
Yes.
But those are just a few of the thoughts. I truly, obviously you should work on that, but men already know that. Like
Yes.
most men, um, they already feel that shame because they already strive more for that greatness than
Yes.
women do. Um, and obviously, I mean, certain demographics of men.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not gonna engage in this because I think it's just like, especially Christian women. I am a Christian. I'm not even saying that as an opportunity to bash on Christians
Mm-hmm.
overall, but like Christian women specifically, they have this stigma or like, how do I say, stiffness in regards to, and I think a lot of it stems from they regret who they married. Um, and they're not truly attracted to who they perceive that they settled on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think that they enjoy using it as they won't say this, they won't ever admit it because to admit it would mean to uh, force yourself to be introspective about how to maintain a healthy marriage even when you know you're not at the situation or in the situation you want to be in. I don't even know if I'm saying that right or just like
No,
what I'm
absolutely.
thinking. But
You brought up a lot of good points, and I'll say at first here, you rightfully detect that like men don't need this lecture from women because this is like one of the things in the locker room or every time every man comes across the like self-development arc, their first contact with the self-development, read the 48 laws of power type stuff. The first two things they like seek out or understand that they don't want to be beholden to are the it was with the gym stuff. They don't want to be like a fat lazy pig, and they also want to like knock it off with the porn. So you're absolutely right to say that it's not women's place to argue this as if men are enabling each other in some fashion. This conversation that appears to women as men enabling it is strip away the words. What is actually going on here? What is going on here is about male sexuality itself. So the male points have nothing to do with porn and more so to do with just the overall understanding of male sexuality. These people are just using these words and these concepts of porn and stuff as a proxy. And so you're rightfully coming up with or alluding to when women do this stuff, particularly Christian women. Of course, what are Christian women doing with this? I said earlier today, and it really got me thinking, Christian women are LARPing that it's Christian with this stuff, of course, with the exception of you, Based a Friend, and Doyle too. But the Christian women thing is they are religious, but God isn't their God. Women are their God. And they just masquerade that under the guise of Christianity. And how that functions in this porn stuff is they forbid and chastise men about pornography. But I think you're right to allude to the two things about that, which is they're really just resentful of male sexuality because when for these women, their sex, especially because they married someone they're unattracted, they're not attracted to because he's a beta or something like that. So it's a man who they married for the quote unquote safety. But of course, that always amounts to ego pathology safety rather than actual tangible lifelong prospect safety and physical safety. So they marry for safety. So it's almost like they try to linearize safety by then leveraging sexuality as power. The more power they have in that, the more they can leverage the control and the behavior of their man. The more of that safety they can exacerbate, and it's sort of like this endless optimization thing. And that's just also because like these types of women tend to be like big fat scaredy cat babies. You know, there's this like latent sensation for women to constantly be scared of everything and everything everywhere, to include within the confines of a relationship. And so porn strips them of that power. It strips them of that sexual leverage. And so when a man satiates himself with porn and the nature of their relationship is just sexual in that fashion, it threatens them. It threatens their sense of being able to leverage anything in the relationship because, of course, she has nothing else to really offer him because she's, as I mentioned throughout the stream, she's an insentient retard, but also she has nothing else to offer him because he's an insentient retard and he doesn't care for much of anything else. And so they lecture, they finger wag about it, but they're really saying, your sexuality belongs to me, which means that I'm going to give you some treats whenever, just to sort of strut you up maybe like once a month. But porn strips them of that capability. And so they most certainly finger wag that, just pursuant to themselves, pursuant to the morality of we're all to subordinate and listen to women on this. And I think you're right to say it is uncouth because they're always seething about it. It's always this like seethe. They bring it up, and fundamentally the problem is this goonette dilemma of they think that like a quote unquote safe option and an alpha attractive option are diametrically opposed. And that's just not true. It's just that their goonette dilemma, as I mentioned throughout the stream, the goonette thing of using their feeling spiking as a barometer leaves the alpha type males who are like safe insofar as not that they don't have access elsewhere, but safe in that they're sentient, they have agency, and they want the relationship, they want the marriage in and of itself. They go unnoticed because a non-boisterous, sentient alpha type is doing stuff like writing, reading, pursuing goals, pursuing career, pursuing degrees, and along those lines. And those are ostensibly boring because they're not exciting, they're not pleasant, unless, of course, you have this sentient love for craft. So all that's to say, you're absolutely right to point out that these women types have these Christian women types. Women are their God, not God. They're just endlessly preoccupying themselves with emotional pathological safety, preoccupying themselves with ego strokes of power through excoriating porn use, and they just find it threatening and egotistically threatening as well when men consume porn in light of their non-sexuality. And I'll say the last part, this is what I was getting at. Of course, there's an accountability element, right? Because we all say, okay, well then just have sex with your husband. Then all of a sudden, they are disgusted at that prospect because you're telling them to have sex with somebody they're not attracted to, which of course reduces to this disgust in the confines of the hunter-gatherer instincts and this sort of sense that they'll, even though it's not pursuant to children per se necessarily every single time, our brain will still read that as, or her brain will still read that as, ew, I just got impregnated by a beta. And that's like the ultimate anathema to them. That's like the ruining, the ending of their entire life, the ending of their prospect of reproducing successfully. So of course there's that accountability element to it. But to your point, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to have everything from a man by leveraging sexuality, by leveraging the shame of porn, but without having to do anything about it. They want to have their cake and eat it too with this type of stuff. They want this extremum safety. It's the woman version of the man who is like, fucks a girl with this sort of carrot dangling of a relationship, this carrot dangling of the potentiality, but not wanting to do that, just wanting to treat it as just this optimized access to sex. pursuant to ego, pursuant to this laziness instinct. So these women are doing that. It's essentially the relational version amongst them of the gym, wanting to have the physique without having to work out, wanting to have the relationship boyfriend or something like that without having to do our part. And these women also neglect the part where like a man can become attractive. They really more so would do well to encourage their man to work out or something like that. But of course, to your point too, that escapes their mind because they don't work out, because they don't want to work out. The presence of him working out or something along those lines forces an accountability on them, a consciousness of the importance of lifting and all that. So you're absolutely right that they also don't want to give that. And then the fat and the lazy types also want to shame porn, but also not do their part to be attractive enough for him such that he shirks the porn there. So that was a link there because I was searching my thoughts quite a bit. So, but thank you for that. Thank you for that addition. Feel free to keep going with me. I can keep going for as long as you'd like, or as long as anybody on the stream would like. If you have any additional thoughts. Are you still there? It says you're muted. It might have dropped you or something like that. So, alrighty. I think USA sovereignty. I think you dropped from the space, or the space itself dropped. So I will proceed with the end of our stream there, I suppose. Marchese Daily. Oh, there you are.
I just have other things going on, but no, I think you said it excellently. You verbalized it accurately. I I'm just always so amused by the dialogue because you can just tell it's always seething women who want to, like you said, rest in their own mediocrity,
Yes.
and they can't just be mediocre and accept their place in life.
Yeah.
They have to always, I guess, take everybody they love down with them. So you see it with moms who are like fat too. It's always like, hold on just a sec.
Yeah. Sure thing.
It's always like, you know, you did this to my body, like you did, it's always this externalizing of their own shortcomings.
Yes.
It's so toxic. It's, and then as as Christians, you sit there and think that you can lecture on why there's um, a birth crisis. Well, if you've been raised in an environment where your maternal parent has nothing but seething is the undercurrent through seething resentment over having children, over what they've done to her, blah 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 blah. Um, I mean, that's just an extension. It's all an extension. It's your own self confidence, your own um, lack of, how do I say this? Willpower, I suppose.
Yeah.
Your lack of
Discipline.
uh, discipline. Yeah, thank you. Um, to actually accomplish greatness. And it is not really that difficult to be great in this modern society as far as, just weekly discipline. And if you show that you have that discipline, that you can um, just maintain uh, a baseline
Mm-hmm.
of fitness, and still have children, and still you won't see the same resentment. And all it comes down to is this external lashing out
Yeah.
at their own lack of yeah, discipline, their laziness, their unwillingness to change. And like you said, it is an unwillingness. They don't want to encourage in the way a wife should be encouraging, in a way they should.
I think I lost your audio there for a moment. Yeah, your audio cut out there for a moment. In the meantime, while I guess maybe join and rejoin. And in the meantime, for the stream, I will say USA Sovereignty, always a pleasure. Good friend here, '07. She rightfully points out you might have heard on my stream yesterday or maybe the day before, something, I think it was yesterday, about like the Nazi costume. This moralizing thing, right? These Christian women types will attach themselves to that, attach themselves to the image of Christianity and the morality that comes with it, and moralize everyone else to project outwards their feeling of moral inferiority. They're not living up to their actual purported standards, their super ego, and everything along those lines. And so, to rather than live up to it, because that'd entail, like she says, discipline, sequestering feelings along those lines, women and pleasure and pleasantries are their gods. So to worship those instead of pursuing the actual discipline and everything along those lines, pursuing morality, they will just moralize everyone else to place their inferiority off themselves, offload it onto somebody else, and that way they can bolster a sense of superiority by, first of all, almost like this brain trick of thinking that it's removed from yourself, and also a comparative thing of comparing comparatively you're linearly more moral than them in some fashion, particularly if you're Christian, and particularly if you're a Christian woman who doesn't consume porn, which is like easy for women because porn doesn't do this. They're not visually as sexual as men or something along those lines. So it's like it's easy to moralize somebody about, like, men about porn if you're a woman, because porn isn't exactly the same level of tempting for you. So great addition there. And then what's more, she rightfully points out that the seed about children is this seed that the children strip them of that pleasure and pleasantry indulgence. That's really like the problem of all these women not wanting to have children, because they want to give up their homoerotic fucking cheese platters and wine glasses and New York City apartments that none of them have, by the way, anyway, because they're all too poor to afford them anyway. And that's not to say like it's a poor thing, but it's just because they're all like $10,000 a month plus. The corner unit with the floor to ceiling windows, like, none of you are going to fucking get that. You know, especially because, don't you all complain about how you're not paid enough anyway because, libtardism or something along those lines. So, and I will say too, she's right about the disciplinary component about greatness. And when we observe greatness, we're often thinking of it in terms of like a career or something along those lines. But let's, like, for women, greatness is in facilitating the family and the motherhood and the unit. And I know a lot of women still don't understand that, even along our side of the internet. Many of them still pursue jobs or careers or education or something along those lines. And I do think in some way that's valuable to women's development and their growth, and they contributes to their greatness, just not as heavily as motherhood or the family unit. And like, eventually the motherhood stuff is going to be sidestepped just by how the children do come of age. Like, the children are going to become like 5 to 10 years old at some point, which means, it's not like you have to spend every wakeful second of every wakeful day with your eyes on them. You still have other things to do. And, naturally, when they grow up to be like adolescents, like, you got to have something to do. So rightfully, women should enter like some version of work in some fashion like that, I think. Just not be a faggot about like pursuing like a girl boss career, and the greatness in facilitating the family unit as well also pursues like a proxy expression of career and whatever greatness, particularly amongst raising sons. If you're raising sons well and orderly and really nudging them as a mother along those lines, and then they're successful, like, that is a proxy expression of you having a mark on the careers and the jobs and the sort of skills elements to the world. The local blacksmith is your son or something along those lines, and you raised him, so you contributed to that. That's your contribution. We're used to value and greatness in society in expressed through the trades and the skills along those lines. You could think in like a group of the olden days, the old villages. And so we're used to this sort of stuff facilitating society, but fundamentally, like, what is the end goal? The end goal is also reproductivity. And we also want to reproduce quality children. And so quality children come from an intact, stable, healthy familial home that cannot be done with a mother like prioritizing work. And the cope is, well, let's say you do it the other way, the woman goes the other way. I think the nature of a relationship to children is necessarily the mother as the caretaker. It's like biological, it's programmed. But then also, even though we're not in hunter-gatherer society, I think it still does something to women that's fundamentally damaging to go off and work. It still emulates being a hunter instead of a gatherer, instead of staying back and tending to the facilities and the children. So ultimately, those roles, it's sort of like these women who try to express greatness through career or something like that. They're tacitly suggesting that being a mom or being a family or everything associated is the easy, like, low skill thing to do. That's like the proletariat thing to do, according to them. But they'll also simultaneously say, it's worth $200,000 a year. So anyway, it's kind of funny to think about the end of the stream here, how this stuff is all interrelated, but you have to really watch through to see the linearity to it and everything. So, all right. So sovereignty, if you're still in the space, but it's not showing up, thanks for showing up. Thanks for your thoughts. You're always a welcome addition. One of the loyalist, most epically epic Marchese Maxers there. Go ahead and give her a follow if you're one of my buddies. Or if you're a Marchese Maxer, give me a follow, like, subscribe, retweet, engage. I'm stuck at 1.1-ish K on X. Let's bump that up to 1.2. We got to get that coveted change over from 1.1 to 1.2. I'm about like 20, 30 followers away or something along those lines. Coaching at marchesemethods.com, 1 hour sessions or 4 hours upfront for a reduced price. Discord to text me all day at marchesemethods@proton.me for access, or DM me $5 a month, $50 for one session, $120 for 4 sessions. Base therapy, base coaching, everything you might need to get your eyes on the prize and find your fulfillment. That's Marchese Daily, live on the air Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Until tomorrow, I will see